Business Leadership South Africa CEO Busi Mavuso says the country needs to shift to lockdown alert level 2 as soon as possible. This is in order to aid economic recovery. For more on this, she joins us live tonight, and she, of course, is the CEO of Business Leadership South Africa. Sis Busi, good evening to you, and thank you so much for your time tonight. The call for lighter restrictions, of course, I imagine is done in the midst of what is a strengthened vaccination rollout program. Although the numbers of COVID-19 infections have been declining, they still remain relatively high. Do you think the time is right for restrictions to be eased?
Good evening, and thank you very much for the invitation. I think when you look at the level of infection, or rather the infection rate as reported, let's agree that we have seen a drop. But I think you will also agree that in terms of the vaccines that have actually been administered, especially in the past few weeks or maybe in the last month, you would see that with the opening up to the 18 years to 35 years of age cohort, we've seen a rise in the level of vaccinations that have actually been administered. So as much as, and I think we've always made this consistent call as business, that as much as we are actually worried about ensuring that we manage the health crisis or the health issues that confront us as a country, let's not forget that we also are sitting with a very serious economic crisis. So we're therefore going to have to look at, at what point do we actually pay attention to that? At what point do we actually open up the economy so that we can open up the economic activity, to its fullest? I mean, Kathy, you're sitting in an environment, as per the recent unemployment stats that were released, we're sitting with unemployment of 44.4% in terms of the expanded definition. We have more people that are unemployed than those that are employed in all the provinces except Gauteng and the Western Cape. I think you would have seen the GDP numbers today. You would see that although we have actually, the GDP has expanded by 1.2%, we still have not reverted to the pre-level or pre-COVID levels, of growth of the economy, as it were. So there is therefore a need to look at how do we boost economic recovery as a country. And we're therefore saying as business, let's balance the scales and let's make sure that while we are dealing with the health crisis, we don't forget, that the economy is also under a serious pressure as well, and that needs to be seriously taken into account.
One of the difficulties right now that government is facing with the vaccinations is that the uptake hasn't been as quick as government would have hoped for, and we still have a marginal section of the adult population that has been vaccinated so far. Do you see business playing a role in working with government to increase the number of vaccinations if the lockdown restrictions are reduced?
And Kathy, we actually are, holding hands with government and working collaboratively with them at looking at how do we actually get more people vaccinated. But obviously, you have the whole anti-vaxxers, campaign that is actually going on. But when you speak to a lot of businesses, you would see that a lot of them are actually going full steam in terms of putting deadlines, in terms of when they're expecting people to come back into the office. And when that happens, it is therefore going to be on the onus of the employee to ensure that they either produce a COVID test every week at their own expense or every second week or whatever the case is. And you would see that although we are saying it's not mandatory, but we are pushing people to a point where they actually see it fit, to have themselves vaccinated. Because I think this is about protecting all of us. And I think the current conspiracy theories that exist in as far as the vaccine is concerned are really not helping. We need to move to a point as a country where we reach herd immunity. I think if you look at the UK, you will see that economy has actually gone back to normal. Look at their stadiums at the moment, and few people are even wearing masks. I'm not saying that we should actually support people not wearing masks, but you would see that because 80% of the economy has been vaccinated, they are back to full economic activity, but the most important thing is that even if they are reporting the infection rates going up, but the hospitalization and the deaths are actually at their lowest. So you see, therefore, the effectiveness, of having people vaccinated. And I think we therefore need to take such cases and look at how we present them in the South African context and really look at how many people have really died, in the UK, for instance, due to them being vaccinated, so that we can start dealing with these myths, and I think we're also trying to bring incentives and a whole lot of other, interesting ideas to get people vaccinated. But I really think that we cannot wait for that. We're going to have to put people in a position where if we are not vaccinated, there's going to have to be restrictions or measures that you're going to have to observe, to participate in the public, so that then you are not a danger, to the rest of us. But shutting down the economy while you are waiting for people to make up their minds as to whether they want to get vaccinated or not, we don't have that latitude as a country. We're sitting in a very dire situation. And something is going to have to give, and it's going to have to give soon, unfortunately.
Busi, are we likely to see more and more businesses come out unequivocally? This is in terms of their position on the vaccinations, either of their own employees or even of people who are to access their premises?
Yeah, Kathy, we are. I think we have seen Discovery's Adrian Gore, having said that vaccination is actually mandatory, and everyone is expected back to the office. I think is it by the 31st of January or something like that, and that is the expectation. I spoke to one CEO of a big organization, JSE listed company today as well, and they're actually saying because they are an industrial company, working from home, doesn't make sense for them, and the company has actually taken a lot of pressure during the COVID period, and people are expected back to the office on the 1st of October, and he's actually saying that it will be expected that an employee that is actually not vaccinated will have to produce a COVID care certificate on a weekly basis, on their account, or on their at their cost. So it therefore means, that as much as we cannot infringe on people's constitutional rights in terms of why they don't want to get vaccinated, and I think they can give a whole host of reasons, but I think we've got an obligation to protect the majority of our employees within our workplaces to say, how do we then deal with those that are not interested in vaccinating? If you're going to be able to produce, a vaccine or rather a COVID certificate every week at your own cost, then it's okay, it's fine. We are going to go back to business. But as business, we are not actually going to wait for the anti-vaxxers, not when the economy is in this dire situation, not when a lot of businesses are actually shutting their doors because of the reduced economic activity, not when a lot of us are put in a position where we actually have to let people go and actually make a lot of people, join the unemployment queues, which puts a further burden on the fiscus. I mean, we are having a conversation at the moment as a country around the basic income grant, and the one question that we are yet to answer as a country is where is the money going to come from? When we know that our fiscus is under a huge amount of strain, we are reintroducing the 350 unemployment grant so that we can ensure that we deal with the high levels of unemployment. So you can see, that the more we remain unvaccinated, or the more it takes time for us to actually reach herd immunity. We are therefore going to continuously be shifting these deck chairs around as a country, where government is going to have to be forced to come up with interventions, and I don't think that the onus has to be on government. The onus can't be on government. It's going to have to be on those who don't want to be vaccinated to say that you are therefore going to have to ensure that you deal with the consequences of not being vaccinated.
You're bringing me to my next point, this idea of consequences for not being vaccinated. Is it not tantamount to punishing people for the choice that they are making to not get vaccinated?
Kathy, leadership requires that you actually take decisions that are in the broader good of the economy, of the country, of businesses, but, you make decisions that are going to benefit the majority, and if we're sitting in an environment where it has been proven in other countries and other economies that when you reach herd immunity, you are sitting in a situation where when people do get infected, they don't become hospital cases, so it doesn't therefore burden the fiscus and it doesn't burden our strained hospital system in our case, and it doesn't lead to deaths. You therefore have taken a decision as a country, as we have, that vaccination therefore seems to be a logical decision or a logical path for us to take to actually prevent the level of deaths that we're actually subjected to as a country. So if we agree that this is in the broader code, there is no way that the country is actually going to be held to ransom, by those that are, of course, exercising their own rights, which they should, but let's be clear, that in the interest of protecting the majority of the citizens of this country, those that do not wish to be vaccinated for whatever reasons, they therefore have to comply and to conform, to certain measures, and it's not taking anyone's right away, as it were. So I think it's really a balancing function, because if you continue to have this conversation and you become too democratic about it, then how long is a piece of string? So and you can't really change people's minds, or change their religious beliefs or whatever the case is. But let's be clear that if the country is taking this path and this direction and you are choosing not to, then you are gonna therefore be required or be requested to actually conform, to certain measures at your own cost, in this case. And I guess it's going to have to be what it is. We've had enough conversations about this, as a country. So I think it's about time that we implement some of these things for the sake of moving South Africa forward and for the sake of accelerating our economic recovery agenda. Because this is the broader picture and this is the broader agenda that we're actually trying to drive. I think you would have seen when President Cyril Ramaphosa spoke at the Limpopo Investment Conference, last week. He said South Africa is open for business and trying to get investment into the country. But when you ask the question of whether we are, I wonder, can we confidently say that we're open for business when we're actually only sitting at, I don't know, is it 35%, vaccinations, and the answer would probably be that, we are not. Because what investor would want to come to invest in a country where every few months they'll be subjected to these rigid restrictions where their economic activity and therefore their operations are going to actually have to be disrupted, because we are seeing a surge, once again in infections. And I think Minister Joe Phaahla spoke last week and was talking about the C.1.2 variant that is coming on, I think in November. So you're going to have to say, you can see that this train is actually going to crash. How do you stop it? And I say that we stop it by ensuring that you vaccinate as many people as possible. And those that don't want to be vaccinated, I think there's going to have to be consequences, or there's measures that they're actually going to have to conform to. And it is what it is. That's what the country needs right now.
All right. And unfortunately, that number of people that are fully vaccinated right now is sitting much lower than 35%. It's only at 11.1%. So we still have a very, very long way to go. Business Leadership South Africa CEO, Busi Mavuso.